We are live.
Merry Christmas and welcome to a very special festive episode of Founder Hacks, our podcast where we share something we've seen, something we've read, and something we've learned that's been a source of inspiration or edification for the founders that we work with. Let me start by saying a profoundly festive hello to Mr. Alex Moore.
Hello, love the Christmas jumper, by the way, Ben. Looking great.
It had to be done, didn't it, really?
Really good.
It is,
Shame it's wasted
Christmas
on our medium of the podcast. But anyway, yes.
It is sadly. Maybe one day we can do a video cast or something. I believe people do. Equally, I need to wish a very, very merry welcome to Mr. Anthony Enright.
Ho, ho, ho.
And equally, very impressed with the hat, Mr. Enright. You are fully Santified. Or are you an elf? I don't know.
Santa. We'll go with Santa. We'll go with Santa, yeah.
Very good, very good. Well, just to share with our listeners what we've been busy doing. As some of you may know, we come together, usually on a Monday, and we each bring something we've seen, something we've read, and something we've learned to the table. That means we come up with 9 founder hacks a week. Of those, only 3 make the final cut, which meant that this year so far we have an archive of just over 150 founder hacks that have never seen the light of day. So when it came time for us to think about a Christmas special, we thought, well, how better to celebrate this festive season than for us to go back through that wonderful archive of all the founder hacks and pull out the very best that never were. Of course, some of them were not founder hacks because they were rubbish, but it has to be said, having sifted through that great archive, many were fantastic and we simply didn't have the opportunity to share. So we've all gone through and picked our very favourites to share with you this time. So, without further ado, I believe it's me to kick off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I shall do
Bit
so.
rare. You're normally in the learns, Ben. But
I normally bring up the rear, but today I'm having to take the vanguard. That's okay. I will do my best. So I guess my scene, really, and maybe I've updated it slightly. It's something that came up for me quite a few months ago, actually, in the beginning of the podcast. It was actually my wife's recommendation. I was talking to her about something that I was seeing happen, and she said, "Oh, I want to buy you a book." And I was like, "Oh, what book do you want to buy me?" And she bought me a book called The Invisible Child by Tove Jansson. And Tove is, I believe she's from Finland, actually, but she writes the Moomin books. I don't know if you've ever come across this. Do you know guys?
I love the Moomins.
Do you know the Moomins? The Moomins are fabulous, right? They're just brilliant. And actually, her original writings are allegorical and profound and clever. And I'll tell you this little story, and then I'll explain how it relates to what I've seen. And the story of the Invisible Child is that a little girl wanders into the Moomins' town, and she's invisible. And she's invisible because people have been cruel to her. And because people have been cruel to her, she's become invisible. And so the Moomins look after her and they take her in and they care for her. And slowly the child starts to reappear. And after a little while, she's just got a dress. And then there's just a little pair of legs. And this little child starts to reappear because she's happy. And eventually the child almost fully reappears, but she still hasn't got a face. She still hasn't quite got a face. And it's only when Grandpa Moomin, I think Grandpa Moomin is playing silly games, and Grandpa Moomin pretends he's going to push Grandma Moomin into the river when they're boating, and the little invisible girl gets very cross, and she says, "Grandpa Moomin, don't do that to Grandma. That's terrible. Oh, how dare you!" And suddenly her face appears. And I just thought it's a very beautiful story. It's kind of profound. That actually, for us to be truly seen, we do have to connect with all of ourselves, all of our emotion, all of what we want to express in the world, all of who we are. And that might include assertion and making it known that we have a view. And I guess where I connect it to what we've been through this year is, I think it's for many people, and yes, founders certainly, but I think for many people the temptation can be for us to feel so overwhelmed by what's been going on. Perhaps we do disappear, perhaps we stop asserting, perhaps we stop making some noise, raging against the dying of the light. And I just thought this is a lovely little metaphor that actually, let's remember the way we get through this is actually by being all of who we are, by bringing all of us to the table, by sharing all our love, our passion, our rage, and pouring that into everything we do. And this lovely little story by Tove Jansson is just a lovely reminder of that yeah, as we come through this, let us all be seen for all of who we are. So that's my share, guys. It's one I absolutely loved. And Alex, what do you reckon?
Oh, I loved it. I love how your wife buys you children's books, Ben, to stimulate your brain. To stimulate
founder hacks. Love it.
The intellectual depth of this show. Loved what you had to say, and I do. Yeah, you do. I found you do have to bang the table sometimes to be noticed, and it was all about being kind, but then she had to lose her temper to be noticed, and it's just sort of a clever story. And I just think as a founder of a business, you're in many ways the rocket fuel of your business, and when you're down, you lose it. The business can lose direction. Your colleagues can lose their motivation, everything. And I think as a founder, keeping going and, even having a really bad day to put the happy face in there. But, to have the energy, I've always, it's hard to describe this to non-entrepreneurial people, but it is the founders energize a business. It's the personification of them largely. So, it is, and it's largely the expression of emotion, and how those emotions are expressed can dictate the direction your business goes in. So and sometimes that is shouting, and sometimes that is getting cross, and they should all be there really, I think, and just used in the right way at the right times. So lovely, Mr. Enright. Do you agree? Disagree?
Well, what I was sort of reminded of as I was listening to both of you there is that there's huge pressure on the entrepreneur, on the founder, on the owner of the business, isn't there? Because, ultimately, if you're having a bad time, and I remember in 2008, in the recession in 2008, at the sort of final quarter of that period, and hitting my business really hard, and that lasting quite a long period of time. And actually, I got into a bit of a rut. I definitely got into a rut at that point of feeling like there was, no light at the end of the tunnel, and wondering what the future looked like. And all of a sudden, I started to disappear. And I even remember changing my seat in my office. A bit later on during that sort of recession, unfortunately, my father passed away. And I just remember retracting more and more from the business, but realizing that actually the business was doing worse and worse, and continually following my mood. And something had to change, and I think there was a moment where somebody just called it out and said, "What is going on?" Until you work out what you want next, until you understand what you want, the business isn't going to improve. It's not going to improve on its own. And I remember feeling that huge pressure, but also it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me as well to go, okay, I need to step up and go forth. And my confidence was low, everything was low, but I just had to bring it. I just had to bring something to the table, and just had to start talking and start bringing out. And you know what? Day by day, week by week, etc., things started to improve. Really, that was the start of the journey of growth and scale for me, and actually for me to start to actually achieve some of the real big goals that I set in my personal life and business life. So when I heard you, I felt a little bit emotional there, Ben, when I heard you tell the story, because I think, huge pressure on a founder. Your business is an embodiment quite often of your own thoughts and feelings, behaviours, and you have to realise that quite early on. And you have to take control. In my experience, you have to take control of the situation. And even if you're feeling low in confidence, just start doing something. Speak to somebody, talk to somebody, go for a meeting, do something to kick it off, and the confidence will come. Alex, what were your...
Well, I think it's really interesting. You're taking Ben's story about the invisible child becoming visible. Yours is more sort of a founder can fade You can become visible and invisible, and I guess your mood and your drive and how you're feeling and all the other things you're going on in your life. It sounds like you're having a horrible time of it. 2008, you come in and out of focus. So I just thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. It's a great metaphor, right? I know it's a great metaphor, and I think I've seen founders who at points I feel have become invisible inside their businesses, and it is ever so hard to accept that who you are is enough. It's okay to be all of who you are in that context, and many founders who I've seen being successful and happy in that success, it has become that sort of intertwining of creating their business, but that also becoming a fulfillment of their own destiny and wants and values and who they are in the world. It is all a statement of that. So I think it's very powerful. But thank you both for that, and thank you for letting me share. I think we're going on to something that we've read, and I believe it's Mr. Enright.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Beautifully introduced there, Ben. So this one was slightly earlier in the year. I think it was in the summer, where I was reading several articles and going through a bit of the doldrums, actually, with regard to what was happening economically due to the pandemic. And I came across this quote, and all of a sudden it started to shift my point of view and the point of view of those around me. And the quote is from Arundhati Roy. And she's quoted as saying, "Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next." And I just think that absolutely resonated with me at the right time to really look at this and go, actually, this is an opportunity, right? History tells us that these things happen. And look at the evidence that we now have from when it's happened in the past as to what positivity has come from a really negative situation. And at times I can be accused of always looking at a positive, getting a positive out of a negative, and always saying to people, "Well, I don't feel so down about this because the flip side of it is this." And people say, "Look, I just want to," a little bit like we were talking about a few moments ago, I just want to sit with this and it isn't good news, and please don't turn it into good news. But actually, this really resonated with me that again, with some of the organisations that I work with, the way that they have pivoted during this time, and actually their businesses will be very, very different as a result, and they'll be very different. And I'm really hoping, and certainly the evidence so far is to the real positive, real positive impact of actually, no, my business can't be sustained like that anymore. I have to pivot. I have to look at something new. And there is an opportunity that comes out of this. And actually now looking at it a few months later, how true that is in quite a lot of circumstances. Ben, what were your musings on this?
It's a fabulous quote. It's a fabulous quote from a fabulous, all-round fabulous human being, Arundhati Roy, who inspired me to go and read her wiki page. And I understand she's an activist and an amazing influencer in India and globally. It's interesting. I guess, yes, I did see it through the lens of opportunity, as you've shared, but I also saw it, and in this quote, you kind of get this sense of obligation. We are going to a new world. You don't have a choice about that. We are going to a new world. And the only choice you have is how you roll as you get there. But we are going through this portal, this gateway. We are going into a new world. So I thought at one level that it is inspiring, it's scary, it's frightening, and there is hope in it. So maybe where you saw opportunity, I would see hope. Because through the portal, there is a new world. It's not the end of something. It's just the beginning of something new. But what a powerful quote. And a gateway between one world and the next. Alex.
Sounds very science fiction-y, doesn't it? I loved it too. I had fun at school, but I wasn't really into many of the subjects. But I did love history. I really, really loved history. And to this day, I still do. And And I think looking at recently reading about the 1920s and the world, what happened to the world after the outbreak of the Spanish flu pandemic had gone away. And it was, everyone went pretty much mental. Sexual revolution, mass promiscuity, unchecked capitalism, consumption, partying. It ultimately resulted in the crash of the Wall Street crash at the end of the 20s. And it's quite easy to see that we could go, human beings being human beings, we could repeat it again exactly 100 years later. It's very, very interesting. But yeah, to me, I hope that the world will be a better place at the end of this. And yes, it will be different, and we're on our way. And I think founders, if they could jump, there's a lot of opportunity out there now for people who accept that and react to it. So, yeah. And thanks for telling me who Arundhati Roy was, Ben, because I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was going to pretend, actually, that I knew who she was and pretend and then make out it was me who told you two who she was. But it was actually Ben who told me and Anthony who she was. So
we're
thank you.
all about the learning, right? She wrote a book called The God of Small Things that won the Booker Prize.
I've heard of that.
Yes, that's the book that probably...
Yes,
but she is an author and much more. So very, very cool.
Very good. I love that, guys. So is this is it an opportunity, or are we obligated to actually make that change? But there is hope, or are we going to crash after as forefathers did after the Spanish flu? Certainly hope not, but time will tell. I certainly think the biggest thing for me there is that I read this in the summer. And now seeing where things are, and obviously, we're in a slightly, some may say, worse situation now with Tier 4 in London and the South East. But actually, I really feel that most founders now with the vaccine and in place, there is more hope as we go into next year. And we may have to put certain things off for a certain period of time, but there is hope, and there's opportunity. So on that note, we're moving on to our learned now. And Alex, you're going to share your learned with us.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, interesting. So a couple of weeks ago, got together with some of my old forum members from the entrepreneurial organisation, and we had to write down the sort of highs and lows of last year, and and then share it with each other. And I realised, that really by doing this, it was a really interesting experience. I'm not one of those people. I was reading about Nigella Lawson recently and saying, I've had a good pandemic. I've really enjoyed my own company and sat at home, and I feel guilty that it's been fun. And I was like, God, I hated it. I hate 2020. It was like, I'd liked my life before, and I had this little boy, and it was really difficult, and I just awful. But by writing this down, I realised that actually it wasn't as crap as I thought it was. I'd learned a lot of things, and I'd pushed myself. And I think this whole thing about being in the Goldilocks zone, and I pushed myself hard, but not too hard, that I stretched myself to my capabilities, but I sort of came back from it a little bit. And it just reminds me of a quote. I've written down a quote, so forgive me for reading, but I thought this was an interesting one, because I'd collect quotes, and that was another part of my yearly clean out, to have a look at them. And it says, an easy life fashions a mind that can only handle ease. A challenging life builds a mind that can handle challenge. Like a muscle that atrophies without use, mental strength fades unless it's tested. And I'm like, you know what? I can live with that. Goodbye, good riddance, 2020, but thank you for teaching me something. And I think, as a founder, I feel that I've always had to grow as a person, as my businesses have grown. And I do feel like I've grown as a person. And it took writing that down and sharing it with some people I'm very close to realise that. Anthony, you've got some thoughts on this subject.
Well, this was a quote from last week, so it's quite recent to bring it into this. So you've done well for it to come into the Christmas special. But I've been really thinking about that all week, and with the various conversations that I've had, naturally, a lot of the calls that I've had this week, as formal as some of them are, people are a little bit more relaxed. and just want to chat a little bit more rather than talking about strategy and effective execution, etc. And those that are feeling a little bit down, a little bit like, maybe their Christmas plans have now changed drastically because of the situation, and just inspired by this story last week, I've had those conversations and say, well, where were you this time last year, and what have you achieved? And it's fascinating, even organisations that have really struggled, they've learned an awful lot. They've grown individually. The businesses may not have grown, but the businesses have survived. And so actually just that moment to stop and think and look and analyse what they've achieved and what they've learned and how they've grown, incredibly a massive confidence booster for a lot of them that I've spoken to over the last 7-10 days. Just such a simple thing to stop and reflect. Where were you this time last year? Where are you now? What have you done? What have you learned? And I'm going to be continuing to use that with everybody I talk to, because it's just fantastic. Just that, it may not be where you want it to be. Your business may not be where you want it to be. You may not have achieved all of your objectives. You may just have been in survival mode. But think what you've learned. Think what you've taken from it. Really powerful, especially at this time of year.
Mm. I'm reminded of, I'm going to go a little abstract here, chaps, forgive me. There's a dramatic theorist called Antonin Artaud. He was absolutely mad as a brush, insane. I think he ended his life in insane asylum. He was completely nuts. But wrote a few very influential texts on the dramatic arts. And one of his sort of pieces of theory was around what he called theatre of the plague. And he called it theatre of the plague because it's only during plague or pandemic that some fundamental human truths are revealed. It is only during those moments of sort of beginnings of the breakdown of the edges of society and all those rules that we're used to living by. Pandemics plague start to break those rules down a bit. The edges start to fray, and within that we suddenly realise human truths. And I think actually that has happened this year. I've seen it. We suddenly all realise that actually being local and having more time with our families, many of us realise that's something that we would like more of. Perhaps some people they realise they would like less of it, I don't know. But we also have to confront some really fundamental things about who we are, what's important to us and what matters. So I think in that way, I wouldn't be surprised if 2020, we look back on it as giving us some gifts in that space of learning. And equally, I hugely empathise, because I think it can be, some people have, I feel very lucky. Other people perhaps have lost loved ones. They've had challenge that I can't even imagine. I keep on thinking about, I remember in the early days of the pandemic, kind of feeling a bit cross because Greenwich Park, which is near where I live, getting a bit cross because there are all these people in this park, and I just had to stop myself and go no, because these are people who are trying to raise 2 kids in a top floor flat with no outside space. Come to the park. Of course, come to the park. Let's not judge. To me, there was a learn for me. Let's not judge. So maybe we'll look back on 2020 as a year of great learning. Maybe it will furnish some new thinking about who we are and what really matters. Let's hope.
Good one.
So, gentlemen, I think that takes us to about time. So, wow, a fantastic little Founder Hacks Christmas special. Thank you very much for your seeds, your reds and your learns. So, as ever, guys, how can I summarise? Well, I think we started off by remembering that as founders, it's so important for us to be seen, and that means all of us, and it's okay to bring all of oneself into your business, all of your passion on your sleeve, and like the invisible child, sometimes it's only when we truly connect with those emotions and maybe even bang the table that we are seen and we can be all of who we are. Are we going through a gateway? Is this pandemic a portal to a new world? Well, perhaps it is, and maybe we don't have any choice. We're all going to be in that new world, but we do have lots of choice, and maybe we can find opportunity in terms of what we build there when we arrive. And finally, maybe 2020 we can look back on it as some level of gift in terms of what we've learned about ourselves, what matters, and about the world as it could be. as some of the rules and conventions have been challenged by the new way we've had to live in this pandemic. I guess it remains to say, wherever you are, really hoping that in spite of everything that's been thrown at us this year, you can have a really, really Merry Christmas. And thank you very much indeed for listening. I'll say a huge Merry Christmas to Anthony Enright.
Thank you, Ben. Merry Christmas to everybody.
He's taken his Santa hat off now. Have you noticed, Alex?
I was getting a little bit
boring, dull. Back on.
I was getting a little bit warm. I was getting a little bit warm with the insulation.
Excuses.
Yeah. There we go. It's back on.
Anthony now has a Merry Christmas, Anthony, with your Santa hat on. There we go. That's better. And of course, an equally Merry Christmas to Mr. Alex Moore.
Thank you, guys. It's been real. Enjoyed doing this podcast with you this year. It's another high for me. So, thanks, guys.
Absolutely. And of course, a huge Merry Christmas to all of you who are listening. I've been Ben Thomas. This has been Founder Hacks, and thanks very much indeed for listening.